"Get up, you people do not belong on marble floors." The words exploded across the lobby like a whip crack. Every sound died at once, the soft hum of conversation, the echo of heels, the polite buzz of a Monday morning meeting. In the center of it all, a woman in a gray cleaning uniform knelt beside a toppled supply cart. Bleach spilled across the floor, reflecting the chandelier light like liquid glass. Around her, executives froze mid-step, some whispering, others filming, none moving to help. And then came his voice again, sharper, crueler. "You heard me. Pick up your mess and get out before security drags you out for good." His name was Mark Jensen, operations manager, 45, blue suit, red face, and too much confidence in both. The woman he was yelling at didn't flinch. She stayed where she was, one hand still on a shattered spray bottle, the other steadying herself on the polished floor. "Before we go deeper, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been humiliated in front of people who thought you were invisible? If this moment hits you somewhere deep, share it with someone who needs to see it, because in the next few minutes, this lobby will find out exactly who they just tried to erase." At 8:56 a.m., the headquarters of Aldridge Financial was its usual picture of order. Crystal chandeliers, black marble floors, and a reception desk big enough to pass for a judge's bench. Employees lined up for coffee, chatter bouncing softly off the walls. The woman pushing the cleaning cart had entered from the East Service door 15 minutes earlier. Her badge read Elaine Brooks, janitorial staff. No one looked twice. That was the point. Elaine, mid-40s, calm, deliberate, wasn't here to mop floors. She was here to see how her people were treated when no titles were showing. She owned the building, the company, the empire built from 20 years of sleepless deals and quiet storms. And right now, not a soul in the room knew it. Mark stepped closer, pointing like he was addressing a criminal. "You spill chemicals near client elevators again, you are gone, you understand me?" Elaine looked up, eyes steady. "Are you finished?" The question wasn't loud, but it silenced him anyway. He blinked, thrown off by the tone measured, patient, too composed for someone on her knees. The crowd around them thickened, interns whispering, a receptionist pretending to check her phone camera, a security guard inching closer. Mark smirked, mistaking composure for fear. "Do you know how lucky you are I do not call the cops?" Elaine straightened slowly, the quiet weight of her presence shifting the air. "You might want to check who you are talking to first," she said. The crowd murmured, phones lifted higher. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Elaine's gaze didn't waver. Her calm wasn't submission, it was preparation. 10 minutes from now, Mark Jensen would wish he had looked twice. The air itself seemed expensive. A dozen glass panels framed the morning light, scattering it across polished marble and steel. Everything gleamed except for the single streak of spilled cleaner that stretched like a scar across the floor. Mark Jensen stood over it as if defending sacred ground. His voice carried through the atrium again. "I said, clean it up. We have clients walking in any minute, and this," he gestured toward Elaine's fallen cart, "is an embarrassment." Elaine did not move. She watched him the way a teacher watches a child throwing a tantrum, not angry, just patient. "You are raising your voice," she said quietly. He laughed, the sound brittle. "You think you can talk back to me? You are lucky to even have this job." The crowd shifted. Assistants and analysts lingered near the elevators, pretending to scroll through phones while listening. One woman whispered, "Why is he yelling at her like that?" Another answered, "She probably messed up the floor wax again." Elaine bent down, lifted one of the bottles, and placed it upright. Her hands were steady. "I am cleaning it up," she said evenly, "but I will not be spoken to like that." "Oh." Mark's face darkened. "You people always play the victim," he said. "Just do your work and stay quiet." The words hit like a slap. A low murmur rippled through the lobby. The receptionist at the front desk looked up, then quickly back down. A security guard near the corner shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Elaine straightened again, holding the cloth in her hand like a line between patience and pride. "What do you mean, you people?" Mark scoffed. "Do not play games with me. Everyone here knows exactly what I mean." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Even the coffee machine in the far corner seemed to stop hissing. Elaine's jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed calm. She had seen this before too many times. Years ago, at 27, she had been told the same words in a different lobby when she walked in for her first board interview. Same tone, same look, same assumption that success had a color. That day, She swallowed her anger. Today, she would not. At 8:58, the glass doors opened. A delivery man stepped in with a bouquet of white lilies, paused when he saw the crowd, then slipped out again, sensing the storm. Mark took another step closer, invading her space. "Pick it up, now, or I will make one call and you will never work here again." Elaine looked him dead in the eye. "Make your call." For a second, he hesitated. Authority was supposed to work faster than that. He was not used to resistance, especially not from someone he considered beneath him. Around them, the air grew thick. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "This is getting bad." He jabbed a finger toward her chest. "You think you are brave because people are watching? Because of your skin, you think you can play the race card?" Elaine blinked once, slow and deliberate. "No," she said. "I think I am human. That is all." A young analyst standing near the coffee bar spoke up without meaning to. "Sir, maybe just let her finish cleaning. You are kind of—" Mark turned, cutting him off with a glare. "Mind your business, Evan. She is lucky I am not calling security already." Evan's face flushed. He looked down, ashamed, and stepped back into the crowd. Elaine set the cloth on the cart and stood straight. She was taller than most realized, her posture precise, unshaken. "You should not talk to employees this way," she said. "I will talk however I want," Mark snapped. "This is my building." Her lips curved slightly, not a smile, but the shadow of one. "You are sure about that?" He laughed. "Do you even know who I am?" "Yes," she said, "and that is why this is sad." Gasps flickered through the lobby, the kind of quiet gasp that meant everyone was realizing this was not a normal argument. Mark gestured toward the security guard. "Derek, remove her." The guard hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should—" "That was not a request," Mark barked. "Do it." Derek stepped forward reluctantly. "Ma'am, please, let us handle this." Elaine turned her head slightly toward him. "Derek, is that what they told you to say?" He froze. The way she said his name made him pause, as if she knew something he did not. "How do you know my—" "Because I read every employee file," she said softly, "including yours." The crowd buzzed again, whispers moving like static through the air. Mark frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, "you should choose your next words carefully." He sneered, trying to recover control. "You are delusional. You do not read anything but mop labels." Her gaze stayed locked on him. "You are about to learn how wrong that is." For the first time, uncertainty cracked his tone. He turned to the front desk. "Where is the floor supervisor? Who hired this woman?" The receptionist stammered. She came in through corporate scheduling, signed by someone in compliance." "Then get them down here, now," Mark demanded. Elaine reached for her phone. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos. "Carla," she said into the line. "Begin Protocol 7. Location, main lobby." A faint voice replied through the earpiece, calm and efficient. "Confirmed, ma'am. Activating sequence now." Mark blinked. "What did you just say?" Elaine pocketed the phone. "Something you will understand soon." The receptionist frowned at her computer screen. Mr. Jensen, there is a system alert. Something about an internal audit. Your department." He whipped his head toward her. "What?" She looked pale. "It says Ethics Compliance Review in progress." The room fell silent again. Even the lights seemed to hum differently. Elaine stood in the middle of the marble floor, surrounded by fear disguised as confusion. "Mark," she said quietly, "in less than 10 minutes you will understand why speaking down to people can cost more than you can afford." Her calm voice carried through the air like judgment delivered. The clock above the elevator read 9 o'clock sharp. The next act of this confrontation was already underway. The sound of distant footsteps echoed across the lobby as the clock ticked past 9 o'clock. Every breath felt heavier, every whisper sharper. The polished floors reflected a crowd frozen between disbelief and curiosity. No one dared to leave. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Elaine stood motionless beside her cart. The spilled cleaner had dried into a pale mark beneath her shoes, like a wound left open. Across from her, Mark Jensen tried to recover his swagger, but his voice wavered under the weight of watching eyes. "What kind of stunt is this?" he said, louder than necessary. "You think calling someone on your phone makes you important?" Elaine's response was quiet but steady. "It does not make me important. It just makes me visible." Her words cut through the lobby like cold air. A few employees exchanged uneasy looks. Somewhere near the elevator, The young analyst, Evan, whispered, "Visible? What does she mean, visible?" Elaine's eyes swept the room, pausing on faces that refused to meet hers. "Do you know what happens when someone like me walks into a building like this? People look, but they do not see. They look for uniforms, not for worth. They assume the label tells the whole story." Mark rolled his eyes. "Save your speech for someone who cares. You are cleaning staff. You make the floor shine, not speeches." The cruelty in his tone landed heavier than the words themselves. A woman near the coffee station flinched but said nothing. The receptionist bit her lip, typing nervously at her keyboard, pretending to work. Elaine took a slow step forward. "I do not shine floors, Mr. Jensen. I shine light on people like you." He laughed, but the sound cracked in his throat. "You are out of your mind." The elevator chimed. Everyone turned. A man in a gray suit stepped out carrying a tablet. His badge read Internal Audit Department. His voice was calm, rehearsed, official. "Good morning. Is there a Mark Jensen here?" Mark straightened. "Yes. What is this about?" The man glanced at his tablet. "Corporate Ethics Division flagged an incident report from this location. Live transcript is being logged." The room tensed. Phones were lowered. No one dared to whisper now. Mark's face reddened. "Who called this in?" The auditor's expression did not change. "Anonymous escalation under the name Protocol 7. Elaine said nothing. She only folded her arms and watched. "Anonymous?" Mark barked. "This is ridiculous. Someone is trying to—" "Sir," the auditor interrupted, "please lower your voice. This conversation is being recorded." The manager's jaw tightened. For the first time, he noticed the security cameras turning slightly, their lenses adjusting focus. He turned toward Elaine. "You did this. You think this will scare me?" "No," she said, her voice low but deliberate. "I do not need to scare you. I just need you to see yourself." The auditor scrolled through his screen. "Mr. Jensen, I am showing multiple staff complaints linked to your department over the past 3 months. Several reference racially insensitive remarks." The color drained from Mark's face. "Those are lies. Disgruntled employees. None of that is true." Elaine stepped closer. "Every word you just said to me is on record now. Every insult, every assumption." He took a step back. "You are bluffing." She tilted her head slightly. "Then keep talking. The system will tell the truth." A murmur swept through the crowd. People shifted, pretending to busy themselves with papers or phones, but their eyes stayed fixed on her. Something in her posture measured, upright, unwavering, did not belong to a cleaning staff member. Evan, the young analyst, spoke again, softer this time. "Sir, maybe we should just let her finish explaining." Mark snapped at him. "Stay out of this." Elaine turned to the analyst. "Thank you, Evan, but he cannot stop what has already begun." The receptionist at the front desk gasped quietly. "Mr. Jensen," she said, staring at her monitor. "Corporate security just joined the feed. They are watching this live." He spun around. "What feed?" "The camera feed," she said nervously. "It just switched to headquarters monitoring." Mark's breathing quickened. He turned back to Elaine. "Who are you?" Elaine's reply was slow, precise. "Someone who built this place long before you learned to point your finger." He blinked, trying to read her face. The arrogance in his voice faltered. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, "I have heard this tone before. Different decade, different man, same fear." The words lingered, echoing against glass and marble. She looked past him, to the reflection of herself on the polished floor, gray uniform, simple sneakers, the image of someone unseen. It was the same reflection she remembered from 20 years earlier, when she had been turned away from an interview for not fitting the company's image. The recruiter had said it kindly, almost apologetic, but discrimination whispered softly before it shouted. That memory now burned behind her calm. Mark, growing desperate, gestured to the crowd. "You all see what is happening, right? She is turning this into a circus. You want this kind of person running around our building?" A voice from the back answered, quiet but firm. It was the security guard, Derek. "No, sir. I want to see what kind of person you are when the cameras are on." Gasps spread again. Derek stood taller now, the hesitation gone from his stance. Elaine nodded once, acknowledging him without words. The atmosphere shifted. The energy in the lobby no longer belonged to Mark. He raised his voice, trembling with rage. "This is harassment. I am calling legal." "Please do," Elaine said. "They already have my number." The elevator chimed again. This time, two women in corporate badges stepped out, one from compliance, one from human resources. The taller one looked directly at Elaine and then at Mark. "We received the feed," she said. "We are here to observe." Mark's mouth opened, then closed again. Sweat beaded on his temple. Elaine took a breath, the kind that fills a room without a single sound. "I came here to see how my employees are treated when no one is watching," she said. I did not expect to see it this clearly. No one moved. No one dared to speak. Her phone buzzed once. A message on the screen read, "Protocol 7, fully active. Board notified." She looked at Mark one final time. "In less than 5 minutes, you will learn what leadership actually looks like." The clock above the reception desk read 9:05. The reckoning had officially begun. The tension in the lobby no longer felt like air. It felt like pressure, thick, humming, alive. Every person could feel it crawling up their spine. What had begun as a manager yelling at a cleaning lady had turned into something else entirely. A reckoning, live and in real time. Mark Jensen's jaw tightened as he looked from Elaine to the two women who had stepped out of the elevator. Their badges caught the light, compliance, and human resources. His throat bobbed as he tried to swallow down the panic that was starting to rise. "This is ridiculous," he said, forcing a laugh that did not reach his eyes. "We have an employee insubordinate, disrupting business operations, and now we are treating it like a court hearing?" The woman from compliance spoke first, her voice cool and precise. "Mr. Jensen, we are here because corporate received a live escalation through the ethics channel. The protocol was initiated using a CEO-level authorization code." The entire lobby went still. Someone near the back whispered, "Did she say CEO level?" Mark blinked, his voice cracking for the first time. "That is impossible. She is a janitor." Elaine's expression did not change. "You are still assuming," she said quietly. "It has been your mistake since the moment I walked in." Mark pointed a shaking finger at her. You have no right to use that code. Only senior executives." The woman from compliance cut in, reading something on her tablet. The code was valid. Timestamp 8:59, registered under Executive Clearance ID, number 001. She looked up slowly. "That belongs to the Chief Executive Officer." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Phones tilted upward again. The young analyst Evan whispered, 001? That is the top clearance in the company." Mark's face drained of color. He turned toward Elaine, voice cracking. "Who are you?" Elaine took a measured step forward. "You asked me that before," she said. "The answer has not changed. I am the one who built this company from the ground up, the one who made sure every person in this building had health insurance, fair pay, and a future. I came here today to see if those values still lived here. What I found instead was this." Her hand motioned lightly toward him, not accusing, just acknowledging. The gesture alone carried more weight than his entire tirade. "You are lying," he stammered. "You cannot be the CEO." The woman from Human Resources interjected gently. "Mr. Jensen, I have seen her in the executive meetings. You might want to reconsider your tone." He spun around, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "This cannot be happening." Elaine's gaze was steady, unflinching. "It is happening, and every second you spend denying it is being documented and streamed directly to the boardroom." The receptionist at the front desk gasped, her screen reflecting a live dashboard filled with corporate audit logs. "It is true," she said softly. "The feed is active." Mark staggered back a half step. This is a setup." Elaine tilted her head slightly. "No, Mark, this is a mirror." Her voice carried through the lobby, low and sharp. Every syllable landed with purpose. "You see, the thing about power," she continued, "is that people think they can hide behind it. But true power does not shout. It watches, it listens, and then it acts." A tremor of realization passed through the crowd. The young analyst Evan whispered, "She was testing us." Elaine looked toward him and nodded once. "Yes, I was." Mark's breath came fast now. "You cannot just walk in here pretending to be staff." "I did not pretend," she said. "I worked. I pushed the same cart, mopped the same floors, and watched the way my people were treated. I wanted to know if dignity still mattered here." Her words echoed, filling every corner of the marble atrium. Mark's voice faltered. You could have told me." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why would I need to tell you who I am for you to treat me with respect?" That question struck harder than any accusation. It hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Silence stretched long and heavy. No one dared move. Even the security guard, Derek, shifted his stance, eyes downcast. Elaine stepped closer, her voice calm but resonant. I started this company with 2 employees and a borrowed office the size of that broom closet over there. I built it because I wanted a place where people could work without fear of judgment or cruelty. Somewhere where no one's worth would depend on their skin, or their shoes, or the title on their badge. And yet, here we are. Her tone never rose. It did not need to. The weight was in the truth itself. Mark's shoulders slumped. I did not mean— Yes, you did, she said softly. But now you have a choice. You can learn from it, or you can keep pretending that people like me do not belong. Tears welled in the receptionist's eyes. The analyst looked away, ashamed. Derek, the guard, stood a little taller, his voice steady when he finally spoke. Ma'am, for what it is worth, I am proud to work here now. Elaine gave a small nod. Thank you, Derek. That means more than you know. Mark rubbed his forehead, his voice barely a whisper. You could have humiliated me in private. I did not humiliate you, she replied. You did that yourself. I simply let the truth play its part. The woman from compliance tapped her tablet. Ma'am, corporate confirmation just came in. They are requesting your statement for the record. Elaine nodded. Tell them the statement is already being written. In behavior. The crowd watched as she reached for the phone on the reception desk and dialed a single number. Carla, she said, her voice steady. Initiate executive review. Effective immediately. Freeze operations under Jensen's division pending investigation. Confirmed, ma'am, came the voice on the line. Notification sent to all department heads. Elaine hung up the phone and looked at Mark one final time. You have until noon to gather your things. Your resignation will be documented as voluntary. That is the only kindness I will offer. Mark stared at her, lost between anger and disbelief. You cannot do this. She met his gaze, unblinking. I already did. The words landed like a gavel. The crowd exhaled all at once, as if the entire building had been holding its breath. Elaine turned to the employees, her tone shifting from steel to warmth. Let this be a reminder. Respect is not optional here. It never was. And with that, she walked past the silent crowd, her reflection following her in the marble floor like a shadow of justice finally given shape. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence left behind by Elaine's words. Every eye in the lobby followed her as she turned away from Mark Jensen. She did not walk quickly or triumphantly. She walked with the kind of composure that made the walls themselves seem to hold their breath. Behind her, Mark still stood by the shattered bottle of cleaner, looking small against the grandeur of the marble lobby. His hands hung uselessly at his sides. The managers and assistants who had once hovered around him now stepped back as if distance might spare them from his downfall. The woman from compliance spoke softly to him. Mr. Jensen, I will need you to surrender your access card immediately. He did not answer. His mouth opened, but no words came out. When he finally moved, his fingers trembled as he pulled the silver badge from his jacket and dropped it into her waiting hand. The faint, metallic click echoed louder than any voice. Across the room, the receptionist looked down at her computer. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she could not bring herself to type. The young analyst, Evan, leaned against the counter, his face pale. Derek, the security guard, stood straighter, as though a quiet sense of justice had rooted him to the ground. Elaine stopped at the far end of the lobby. She turned, not to gloat, but to finish what had begun. Her voice carried through the still air, low, measured, each word landing like truth written in stone. When I was 21 years old, she began, I was told I did not belong in an office. I was told that my tone was too firm, that my skin was too distracting, that people would not respond well to someone who looked like me giving them orders. I left that interview, walked to the nearest bus stop, and made myself a promise. One day, I would build a place where no one would ever hear those words again. Her gaze swept across the room. And yet here I stand, in the very building I built, hearing them again this time from one of my own managers. The irony is exhausting. The employees shifted, uneasy. None of them could meet her eyes. Mark found his voice again, weak but defiant. You are taking this too far. You are making it personal. Elaine tilted her head. It became personal the moment you decided who I was based on a uniform. She stepped closer again, closing the distance she had once given him. Her heels clicked slowly against the marble, a rhythm that filled the silence with intent. "Do you know what leadership means, Mark?" she asked. "It means being the first to lift others, not the first to crush them. It means speaking with purpose, not poison. You chose the opposite. You thought authority gave you permission to humiliate. But authority without empathy is just fear wearing a suit." Her words cut through him, precise and controlled. The woman from Human Resources looked down at her tablet, nodding slightly as she took notes. Elaine continued, "I have watched you for months. The reports were there. The complaints were there. I wanted to believe they were exaggerated, that perhaps my people were mistaken. But now, I have seen it for myself." Mark looked desperate, cornered by the truth. "You cannot judge me based on one moment. One moment reveals the truth about 1,000 unseen ones," she said. "If you talk this way when the cameras are on, how do you talk when they are not?" No one dared to breathe. The weight of her question settled over the room like dust after an explosion. Elaine turned to the employees who had gathered near the elevators. "To the rest of you," she said, "you may think this is not your problem, that this is between me and one man. But every silence in this room made this possible. Every look away, every whisper, every decision to stay comfortable instead of correct, those were choices too." Evan lowered his eyes, shame flickering across his face. Derek nodded slowly, acknowledging her words without needing to speak. Elaine's tone softened. "Do not mistake this moment for punishment alone. It is a reminder. We do not fix systems by firing people. We fix them by facing ourselves, every single one of us." The receptionist whispered almost to herself, "I never said anything when he spoke like that. I thought it was not my place." Elaine turned to her. "It is always your place when dignity is on the line." The woman nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Elaine looked back at Mark, who was staring at the floor. "You have built your authority on fear," she said. "I built mine on trust. That is why mine will last." The elevator chimed again, breaking the silence. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, Chief Operating Officer Samuel Grant. His voice was calm, but carried the tone of someone who understood the gravity of what he had just walked into. "I have seen the feed," he said. "Elaine, the board is requesting your statement in the main conference room." Elaine nodded once. "I will join them shortly." Samuel turned to Mark. "You are suspended effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Mark opened his mouth as if to argue, then stopped. There was no argument left to make. He took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the ground, and said nothing. As the guard stepped forward, Elaine raised a hand gently. "No need to drag him," she said. "Let him walk. Dignity is not something we take away, it is something we choose not to lose." Mark glanced at her, confused, almost grateful for the mercy he did not deserve. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, every step echoing with the sound of consequence. When the doors closed behind him, the room exhaled. The stillness shifted into something else, relief mixed with reflection. Elaine looked around the lobby one last time. "This building will remember today," she said softly. "Not because a manager was fired, but because truth finally raised its voice." "Oh." She turned toward the conference hall, her reflection gliding beside her on the marble. The sunlight cut through the tall windows, bathing her in a halo of gold as she walked away. Behind her, Derek whispered under his breath, "That is how justice sounds when it does not need to shout." And the lobby, still echoing with her calm authority, seemed to agree. The elevator doors closed on Mark Jensen, and the reflection of his departure lingered on the glass like the ghost of arrogance. The lobby began to breathe again, but the air was not light. It was heavy with what everyone had just witnessed, an unmasking so precise it felt like justice delivered through silence. Elaine stood for a moment, her hands at her sides, eyes unfocused, absorbing the stillness that followed. The power in the room no longer came from fear, it came from awareness. Every person there had seen something that could not be unseen. The young analyst Evan stepped forward, voice trembling. "Ma'am, I did not realize who you were, Elaine stopped him with a calm gesture. "You do not need to apologize for not knowing who I am," she said. "You need to remember what you saw." Her tone was not angry, it was instructional, the kind of tone that carved itself into memory. She turned toward the front desk. "Natalie," she said softly. The receptionist's head snapped up. "Yes, ma'am? I want a list of every employee who works under the operations division. Send it to my assistant Carla within the hour." Yes, ma'am, Natalie answered quickly, her voice shaking slightly. Elaine's gaze softened. Do not sound afraid. Sound accountable. There is a difference. Natalie nodded, blinking fast, then began typing with renewed focus. Derek, the security guard, approached carefully. Ma'am, would you like me to clear the lobby? Elaine shook her head. No. Let them stay. Let them see how leadership handles repair after damage. Her words hung in the air like scripture. At that moment, the elevator doors opened again. 2 men and 1 woman from corporate communications stepped out, their faces pale, tablets in hand. One of them, a man named Victor Hayes, cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, we have been instructed to prepare an internal statement before this story leaks to the media. There are already social media clips circulating. Elaine nodded once. Of course there are. People record pain faster than they record truth. But we will give them both. Victor hesitated. Do you want us to downplay your involvement or... Absolutely not, Elaine said firmly. Tell the truth, every word. Include the part where your CEO came disguised as a janitor because she could no longer trust what was happening in her own building. The team looked at one another, uncertain. Elaine met their hesitation head-on. You are not here to protect me, she said. You are here to protect the integrity of this company. If that means exposing rot, then let the light in. Victor nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. The woman beside him spoke softly. It will be a storm, Elaine. You know how people are about this kind of story. Elaine gave a faint smile. Let them talk. Storms wash away what should never have been buried. She began to walk toward the long corridor that led to the conference room. Every step echoed like punctuation. Behind her, the lobby began to shift, people returning to work, conversations hushed but alive with new awareness. Halfway down the hall, she paused in front of a large glass wall that overlooked the city. From here, she could see the skyline of Manhattan cutting through the gray morning light. It was beautiful in a sterile way, all power and no softness. For a moment, she was not the CEO. She was the girl from Atlanta who had once cleaned hotel rooms at night to pay for business school. She remembered the manager who had told her she was too ambitious for her position. She remembered how that humiliation had burned not just in anger but in purpose. Back then, she promised herself that if she ever gained power, she would use it to shield others from that same shame. And now, all these years later, she realized that power alone was not enough. It had to be seen. It had to be felt. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She answered without breaking her gaze from the window. Carla. Her assistant's voice came crisp through the line. Yes, ma'am. The operations division list is incoming, and the board members are assembled. They have been watching the live feed since 8:57. Elaine exhaled slowly. Good. Then they have already seen the truth. Carla hesitated before speaking again. One more thing, ma'am. The media is requesting a statement. The headline on one of the videos already says, Black janitor turns out to be the CEO. It has over 100,000 views in less than 10 minutes. Elaine's reflection in the window smiled faintly. They will learn her name soon enough. Yes, ma'am, Carla said softly. Elaine ended the call and turned away from the glass. The reflection of the city disappeared behind her, replaced by the long hallway lined with portraits of Aldridge Financial's founding years, rooms filled with men in dark suits, all the same shade of skin, all smiling for cameras that never pointed at anyone like her. She stopped in front of the last frame, an empty space reserved for the current CEO's portrait. The brass plate beneath it already bore her name, Elaine Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Aldridge Financial Group. Her eyes lingered on the plaque. She whispered to herself, maybe it is time to take the photo without the mask. When she reached the conference room, the glass doors parted automatically. 12 board members sat around a long table. Some faces were concerned, others unreadable. The large monitor at the end of the room displayed a paused frame from the lobby feed. Elaine, standing in her janitor's uniform, calm in the face of fury. The chairman of the board, an older man named Richard Aldridge, looked at her with a mix of admiration and discomfort. Elaine, he began, you have certainly made an impression. I did not do it for impressions, she replied, her tone steady. I did it for truth. He sighed. You have exposed a serious problem in our culture, but you have also exposed us publicly. This will be messy. She took her seat at the head of the table. Growth always is. Another board member leaned forward. Was it necessary to humiliate him like that in front of the entire building? Elaine's eyes met his. You are asking the wrong question. Ask instead why it took a disguise for a black woman to be treated like a person in her own company. No one spoke. The weight of her question filled the room like thunder before rain. She folded her hands on the table. We are going to rebuild this culture from the inside out. We will start with training, with transparency, with accountability. And this time, we will mean it. Richard Aldridge looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You have my full support. Elaine inclined her head slightly. Good. Then let us begin. Outside the glass walls, the city kept moving taxis, lights, noise, life. But inside the conference room, something rare had happened. Power had looked itself in the mirror, and for once, it had not looked away. The conference room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Sunlight pressed against the tall glass windows, casting long reflections across the polished table. Elaine sat at the head of that table, her presence steady and deliberate. Every movement of her hands, every pause before she spoke, carried the kind of authority that needed no announcement. Around her, 12 board members shifted in their seats. Some looked uneasy, others curious. The air was thick with tension, but beneath it was something else: respect, though none dared say it aloud. Elaine leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but unwavering. What happened downstairs was not an isolated event. It was a symptom, a reflection of how quickly this company forgot the values that built it. A woman named Lydia Grant, chief financial officer, adjusted her glasses and spoke carefully. Elaine, no one is denying that what happened was wrong. But do you really believe this one manager represents the entire company? Elaine turned her gaze toward her. I believe culture is not built by one man, but it can be revealed by one moment. Every person who stood by and said nothing, every person who laughed quietly instead of stepping forward, told me exactly what I needed to know. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. The weight of truth pressed down like gravity. Another voice joined in: Thomas Reed, head of legal affairs, his tone defensive. We should be careful with how we address this publicly. There are reputational risks. Investors panic easily when they hear words like discrimination. Elaine's eyes met his. Then perhaps they should panic, because silence is more expensive than honesty. The cost of denial is what ruins companies, not the truth. She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. We will not bury this story. We will own it, and we will rebuild our credibility not by statements, but by action. At the far end of the table, an older board member cleared his throat. His name was Walter Green, one of the longest-serving members, and one of the few who had been there since the company's early days. Elaine, he said softly, when I first met you, you were the youngest executive this company had ever hired. I told Richard you would go far because you did not fear confrontation. I was right, but be careful not to let righteousness become revenge. Elaine looked at him with quiet respect. Revenge requires anger. I do not have anger left, Walter, only purpose. The line landed like a closing statement in a courtroom. Even the clicking of a pen somewhere near the end of the table stopped. Richard Aldridge, the chairman, leaned back in his chair, studying her. So, what do you propose, Elaine? She took a deep breath, then stood. Her reflection stretched across the glass wall behind her, twin figures of power and resolve. Effective immediately, she began. We will launch an internal initiative called the Mirror Program. Every executive, every manager, every employee, regardless of rank, will participate. It will include ethics, re-evaluation, inclusion training, and public transparency reports. There will be no exceptions. Thomas Reed frowned. That will take months to structure. The budget alone. Elaine cut him off gently but firmly. The budget for decency is never too high, and it starts now. This afternoon, I will send a video message to every employee explaining exactly what happened in that lobby. Not a press statement, not a polished apology, a truth. Unedited, unfiltered, and undeniable. Lydia leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. And what about you? How will you address your own actions in this? Elaine's expression softened. By admitting that I had to hide behind a mop and a uniform to see the truth with my own eyes. That is not leadership. That is failure. And I will own that too. The room was silent again, but this time it was not fear that filled it. It was awakening. Walter nodded slowly. You are forcing us to look at ourselves, Elaine. It is uncomfortable. She offered a faint smile. Growth always is. The door opened quietly, and Carla, Elaine's assistant, stepped in holding a tablet. "Ma'am," she said, "the internal memo is drafted, and the media team has requested confirmation on your public statement. Also, you should know one of the videos from the lobby has hit over 2 million views." Elaine's brows lifted slightly. "That is faster than I expected." "Yes, ma'am," Carla replied. "The comments are divided. Some are inspired. Others are angry." "That is all right," Elaine said. "Anger means they are watching. Inspiration means they are listening." Carla nodded and stepped back, leaving the room as quietly as she had entered. Richard looked around the table, then at Elaine. "If you go public, you are putting yourself under a spotlight that will not be kind. People will question your methods. They will dig into your past. Are you ready for that?" Elaine folded her hands in front of her. "I stopped living for their approval a long time ago. What matters is not whether they like the truth, it is that they hear it." Lydia exhaled slowly. "You do realize this will make national news?" Elaine nodded. "Good. Then maybe the next CEO, the next young woman walking into a room like this, will not have to prove her worth before she speaks." Her words hung in the air, weighty and prophetic. The older board members exchanged glances. Richard finally broke the silence. "Then it is decided. You have the board's full authorization. Do what you believe is right." Elaine inclined her head respectfully. "Thank you, Richard. I intend to." She turned toward the window again, looking out at the city below. From up here, the people were small, almost invisible tiny dots moving through a maze of glass and power. She thought of all the workers whose names were never known, whose voices never carried past the first floor. The janitors, the receptionists, the drivers, the ones who kept the system running but never got to touch the controls. She whispered more to herself than to anyone else. They will see them now. Her reflection in the glass looked back at her, no longer dressed in a uniform, but in the weight of purpose. Behind her, Richard spoke softly. "Elaine, one more thing. Do you regret it? The disguise, the confrontation, the spectacle of it all?" She turned slightly, meeting his eyes. "No," she said, "because if I had walked in wearing this suit, I never would have seen who they truly are." Outside, the city lights flickered against the growing afternoon Sunday. Inside, the truth had already taken root, unshakable and alive. The boardroom meeting had ended, but its echo followed Elaine down every hallway she walked. Word of what had happened in the lobby had spread faster than any press release could travel. By mid-afternoon, the incident had become a mirror the entire company could not avoid. Screens flickered in every department. Employees replayed the footage on their phones in disbelief, some horrified, some inspired. In offices where laughter once filled the air, there was now a quiet unease. The sound of whispers replaced the rhythm of keyboards. People were not just talking about what had happened. They were questioning what it meant. Elaine stepped into the executive elevator, her reflection merging with the mirrored walls. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The ride was silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the beating of her own heart, steady and deliberate. When the doors opened, Carla was waiting for her in the upper corridor. She held a tablet close to her chest, her expression serious. "Ma'am, the internal statement has been distributed. Every employee has received it. The server nearly crashed." Elaine nodded. "Good. I want it to reach everyone from the interns to the senior partners. No filters." Carla followed her brisk pace toward the media suite. "There is more. News networks have picked up the story. It is trending across every major platform. Some headlines are calling it the CEO disguise scandal. Others are calling it the cleaning lady revelation." Elaine gave a dry laugh. They always love a label more than a lesson. Carla hesitated before speaking again. "Would you like to respond publicly, or should we wait until the interview request from Channel 12 is confirmed?" Elaine stopped in the middle of the corridor. Her tone was calm but firm. "We respond tonight, not with spin, not with defense, with truth." Carla nodded, already typing notes. They reached the media studio, a glass-walled space with a single camera and a dark gray backdrop. It had been designed for shareholder addresses and corporate updates, not confessions. But that was what it would become tonight. Elaine took off her jacket and rolled her sleeves, exposing the simplicity of her presence. She wanted no filters, no polish, no pretense, only honesty. "Set the camera," she said softly. "Frame it tight. No music, no logo. Just me." "Oh." Carla adjusted the equipment, then stepped back. Ready when you are. Elaine sat down, the lights warming her face. For a moment, she looked into the camera without speaking, letting silence claim its own authority. Then she began. This morning, something happened in our building that you all have seen by now. A manager humiliated an employee he believed to be beneath him. What he did not know was that the person he humiliated was me. Her voice was steady but layered with quiet gravity. I came to this building disguised as a janitor because I wanted to see how people were treated when no one was watching. I wanted to know if kindness was still real when power was not in the room. What I found broke my heart, not because of one man's behavior, but because of how many people stood by and watched it happen. She paused. The stillness was deliberate. I built this company on 3 words: trust, respect, and accountability. Today, I saw how far we have drifted from those words. But I also saw something else. I saw courage. I saw a security guard who refused to stay silent. I saw a young analyst who spoke up even when it could have cost him his job. That is what gives me hope. Her eyes softened as she continued. This is not a moment for shame. It is a moment for reflection. We are launching a new program called The Mirror. It will ask each of us to look inward, to confront our biases, our silence, and our complicity. No one is exempt, not even me. She leaned forward slightly, the light catching the sincerity in her expression. If you are watching this and wondering what kind of company you work for, the answer is simple. You work for one that is willing to change, starting today. A pause, then her tone deepened. To the people who watched that video and felt anger, I understand. To those who felt vindicated, I understand that too. But let us not stop at emotion. Let us turn that feeling into transformation. And her final words were quiet but powerful. We do not rebuild trust with statements. We rebuild it with every choice we make when no one is watching. The camera light blinked off. Carla exhaled quietly. That was perfect, ma'am. Raw, honest, powerful. Elaine nodded. Send it out. No editing. Post it across every platform. Let them see the truth exactly as it happened. Carla hesitated. Even the part where you said you were heartbroken? Especially that part, Elaine said. They need to know CEOs bleed too. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. By evening, it had reached millions. The comments poured in, some supportive, others angry, many stunned. In one comment section, a viewer wrote, "This woman did more for corporate honesty in one day than some do in a lifetime." Another said, "It should not take a disguise for people to act decent." Elaine read a few of them from her office, the city lights flickering against the glass. She felt the weight of every word, praise and criticism alike. Both mattered. Both were mirrors. Her phone rang. It was Richard Aldridge. "Elaine, the board watched the video. They are unanimous. The Mirror program is approved. Full budget, full backing." "Thank you, Richard," she replied. He hesitated. "You realize this story will define your legacy." Elaine looked out at the skyline, her reflection faint against the glow of the city. "Then let it define the right one." After the call ended, she stood by the window for a long time. Down below, the streets of Manhattan buzzed with life taxis, sirens, people who would never know her name but would feel the ripple of what she had done. And as the night deepened, Elaine whispered the same words she had spoken years ago when she built her first office. Dignity is not a privilege, it is a right. This time, the world was listening. By dawn the next morning, the world had changed. Aldridge Financial was no longer just a company name, it was a headline. Every major news outlet carried the story. CEO goes undercover as cleaning staff exposes systemic bias inside Fortune 500 firm. From New York to Los Angeles, from London to Lagos, the image of Elaine Carter in her gray janitorial uniform filled television screens and social feeds. Her calm face, the spilled bottle of cleaner, the stunned expression of Mark Jensen all became symbols of something far bigger than one corporate scandal. Inside the skyscraper that bore her company's name, the mood was unrecognizable. The marble lobby that had once echoed with hurried footsteps now carried a different rhythm, quieter, more careful, almost reverent. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Eyes followed her with a mixture of awe and shame. Elaine stepped out of the elevator at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Her assistant Carla was already waiting with a tablet and 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, ma'am." Carla said softly. The Mirror program sign-up just went live. More than 2,000 employees have already registered. Good, Elaine replied, taking the cup. What about external responses? Carla swiped through notifications. Mixed, as expected. Most are positive people are calling you a pioneer. Others think it was a publicity stunt. One headline calls you the silent storm. Another one says CEO shatters corporate facade. Elaine smiled faintly. Let them call it what they want. The truth does not need a better name. They walked through the corridor toward the operations floor. Employees turned as she passed, some offering hesitant smiles, others simply bowing their heads. Elaine did not walk like a queen reclaiming her throne. She walked like someone carrying the weight of 1,000 silent stories on her shoulders. When she entered the main office, all conversation stopped. A woman at one of the desks stood abruptly. "Ma'am, she began, but Elaine lifted a hand gently. "You do not have to apologize for him," Elaine said softly, "but you do have to be better after him." The woman nodded, tears forming in her eyes. At the center of the room, a large screen displayed an internal live dashboard labeled Mirror Reports, Phase 1. Names, survey responses, and anonymous confessions were already coming in. Some were short. "I stayed quiet too often." Others were painfully detailed. "I laughed when someone mocked the janitor. I thought it was harmless." Elaine studied the screen. "Leave them anonymous," she said. "People confess more when they are not afraid." "Yes, ma'am," Carla said, taking notes. The door opened behind them. Derek, the security guard from the previous day, stepped inside hesitantly, his uniform crisp, his badge polished to a shine. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for what you did yesterday. My daughter saw the video. She said, 'Daddy, that lady talks like you think.' I do not think I have ever been prouder." Elaine smiled. "You were brave, Derek. Courage rarely comes with applause, but it always leaves a mark." He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "If you ever need anything—" "I will," she interrupted kindly, "but not for me. For the next person you see being dismissed, you speak for them. That is how this changes." Derek straightened, saluted slightly, and left the room. Carla's phone buzzed again. "Ma'am, there is something else. Channel 12 confirmed the interview for tonight. They want you live at 8 p.m. Elaine took a slow breath. 8 o'clock is fine." Carla hesitated. "Do you want to prepare a script?" "No," Elaine said simply. "If I start scripting honesty, it stops being honest." She walked to the window, looking down at the city. The skyline shimmered in the golden morning light. For the first time in a long while, she saw it clearly not as property or investment, but as a living thing made up of millions of people just trying to be seen. Behind her, the sound of clicking keyboards began to rise again. Work resumed, but it was different now, measured, watchful. Even the silence carried intention. At 9:15, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered. A deep voice spoke on the other end. "Miss Carter, this is Daniel Hayes from the National Diversity Council. We watched your video. We want to collaborate. You have just started something that could redefine corporate culture across the country." Elaine listened quietly. "What do you have in mind?" "A national initiative," Daniel said. "Workshops, speaking tours, televised discussions, real conversations about racial equity and corporate accountability. If you are willing, we want you to lead it." Elaine leaned against the desk, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "That is not what I planned when I woke up yesterday." "History rarely asks for permission," Daniel said. She smiled slightly. "Send me the details. But know this, I will only do it if it helps more people than it praises me." "That is exactly why we called you," he replied. When the call ended, Elaine looked out at the skyline again. The city moved like a giant organism, cars, people, stories colliding in a rhythm that never stopped. Somewhere down there, another woman was probably being overlooked. Another voice was being silenced. The thought steadied her. Carla interrupted gently. "Ma'am, the board wants to review your final approval for the public interview. They are nervous." Elaine turned toward her with quiet strength. "Tell them nerves are good. It means they still care about the truth." As the morning stretched into noon, the company's internal communication platform filled with messages. Some were apologies. Some were promises. Some were stories that had never been told until now. One message stood out. It came from an anonymous employee who wrote simply, "Yesterday, I saw a woman stand up to everything I have been too afraid to name. Thank you for giving us permission to stop whispering. Elaine read it twice, then locked her screen. This, she said softly, is what change looks like before it gets loud. Outside her window, a crane was lifting new steel beams onto a construction site across the street. She watched as workers guided them into place, precision, patience, purpose. It reminded her of the work ahead. Building a structure was easy. Rebuilding a conscience, that was the real challenge. The day would continue. The world would keep watching. But Elaine Carter knew one thing now with absolute clarity. She had not just changed her company, she had opened a door that could not be closed again. And as the sunlight reached the highest floor of the building, it caught her reflection in the glass, no longer the woman in the gray uniform, but the leader who had worn it to remind the world that every job carries dignity and every voice deserves to be heard. The city had quieted into night by the time Elaine returned home. Her penthouse was high above the lights of Manhattan, the kind of view people called success. But tonight, it felt more like distance, a silence too perfect, too far from the noise she had faced all day. She slipped off her heels and crossed the living room, her steps slow, deliberate. The television in the corner played softly, showing snippets from news broadcasts. Her own face appeared again and again, still in the janitor's uniform, still kneeling beside the spilled cleaner. Each network narrated the story with its own version of outrage or admiration. Elaine muted the sound. She could not listen to the commentary anymore. She knew what the headlines said. She knew what the world thought. But what she could not stop thinking about were the faces in the lobby, the frozen expressions of her employees as they watched cruelty unfold. Her phone buzzed on the counter. It was Carla. "Ma'am," her assistant said, voice tired but steady. "Your interview from Channel 12 is already trending. Over 10 million views in the first hour. They are calling it the most powerful corporate statement of the decade." Elaine stared out at the skyline. 10 million hearts listening is not the same as 10 million people understanding. "I know," Carla said softly, "but you did what no one else had the courage to do." "Courage is easier when you have nothing left to lose," Elaine murmured. Carla hesitated. "Do you regret any of it?" Elaine turned toward the window, watching the reflection of the city lights flicker against the glass. "No, regret is for mistakes. This was not a mistake. It was a mirror, and sometimes people have to see their reflection before they change." There was a pause on the other end. "The board wants to meet tomorrow morning. They are getting calls from other corporations. Some are inspired, others are nervous. It looks like you started something much bigger than this company." Elaine smiled faintly. "Then we did something right. Good night, Carla." "Good night, ma'am." She ended the call and stood there in silence. The weight of the day began to settle on her shoulders, the exhaustion, the emotion, the strange mixture of pride and grief. She poured herself a glass of water, but her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it. In that trembling, she saw something familiar, the remnants of the girl she had once been, the one who used to scrub hotel floors while dreaming of boardrooms, the one who had learned to smile when guests called her sweetheart or the help. The memory came back sharp, like a film reel unspooling. She was 21, cleaning rooms at the Hamilton Grand in Atlanta. It was summer, the air thick and sticky. One afternoon, she accidentally entered the wrong suite, a meeting room reserved for investors. The men inside looked up, startled. One of them, in an expensive Navy suit, laughed. "You must be lost, sweetheart," he said. "The service quarters are down the hall." Elaine remembered standing there, mop in hand, cheeks burning. She wanted to disappear. Instead, she nodded politely and left, whispering to herself in the hallway, "One day, you will not be the one holding this mop." That promise had carried her through 2 degrees, 3 failed startups, and 20 years of proving she belonged. And tonight, as the city hummed below her, she realized she had fulfilled it not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they did not belong in the room. She sat on the couch, the lights dim, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the window. For the first time in years, she let herself cry not from sadness, but from the weight of release. The tears were quiet, cleansing, necessary. When the phone buzzed again, she ignored it at first. But when she finally looked, it was a message from an unknown number. "You do not know me," it read. "But I saw your video. I am a cleaning supervisor at another firm. I have faced the same words, the same looks. Tonight, I walked into work with my head higher. Thank you." Elaine's chest tightened. She read it twice, then typed back a single line. "Do not thank me, just keep your head high." She set the phone down and leaned back, closing her eyes. The hum of the city felt different now, less like noise, more like a pulse. At that moment, she realized the power of what had begun was no longer in her hands. It was moving outward into other offices, other buildings, other hearts that had been silent for too long. Her thoughts drifted back to the day before the exact moment Mark Jensen's words had hit her like a slap. "You people always play the victim." She replayed it in her mind, but now it no longer hurt. It sounded smaller, weaker, like a sound already swallowed by history. Elaine whispered to herself, "You cannot shame someone who knows their worth." The night deepened. Rain began to fall against the glass, streaking the city lights into long silver trails. The rhythm of it was soft, almost soothing. She rose, walked to her desk, and opened her leather-bound journal, the same one she had kept since her first year as CEO. She turned to a blank page and began to write. June 22nd. I learned that silence protects power, but exposure transforms it. I learned that dignity can kneel on the floor and still stand taller than arrogance in a suit. I learned that leadership is not about who speaks the loudest, it is about who listens the deepest. Her pen slowed. She wrote one more line. And I learned that justice does not need anger to roar. Sometimes it just needs truth to whisper. She closed the journal and placed it beside her phone. The rain outside grew steadier, wrapping the city in a quiet lullaby. Elaine turned off the lights and stood once more by the window. Down below, a street light reflected in the puddles like molten gold. Somewhere, another janitor was finishing their shift, wiping down another floor. Somewhere, another voice was daring to rise. Elaine pressed her palm against the cool glass and whispered, "You are seen." Then she smiled faintly and whispered again, this time to herself, "And so am I." The rain kept falling, but for the first time in years, Elaine Carter felt completely free, no longer undercover, no longer performing, no longer proving, just being. And in that stillness, beneath the quiet hum of the city, dignity finally exhaled. Morning came slow, wrapped in silver light, and the scent of rain still clinging to the streets below. Elaine woke before dawn, her mind already sharp, her purpose clear. The city was stirring, but she was ahead of it as if the world itself had paused for her to take the next step. She brewed coffee in silence, standing barefoot by the window, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. Every sunrise after a storm felt like a promise, fragile, but real. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was not a headline or a message from the board. It was a video notification. The first internal orientation session for the Mirror program had just gone live. Elaine pressed play. On the screen, a young facilitator stood in one of Aldridge Financial's training rooms. Behind her, the words, "See, listen, reflect," were printed in bold black letters on a white wall. "Good morning, everyone," the facilitator said. "Today begins something new. This is not just a training, it is a mirror. We will talk about how bias hides behind politeness. We will talk about silence, complicity, and how real change begins when we stop saying, 'That is not my problem.'" "Oh." Elaine watched, transfixed. The employees in the room were listening quietly. Some nodded, some looked uncomfortable, some were visibly moved. She smiled faintly. The seeds had taken root. Then her phone rang. Carla's voice came through, brisk and focused. "Ma'am, your meeting with the National Diversity Council is set for 10 o'clock. They want to discuss the public education initiative. Also, we received more letters overnight, hundreds of them, most from cleaning staff, receptionists, drivers, even cafeteria workers across the country." Elaine took a slow breath. "Read me a few." Carla's tone softened. One says, "For the first time, my boss looked me in the eye when he spoke to me." Another says, "You reminded me that wearing a uniform does not mean being invisible." Elaine closed her eyes. "Print every one of them. I want them in the company archive. These letters are our real quarterly report." "Yes, ma'am." After the call, she dressed in a simple black suit, no jewelry, no unnecessary shine. Today was not about appearances, it was about presence. By 9 o'clock, she was back at headquarters. The building felt different now. The security guard greeted her with a small nod that carried genuine warmth, not obligation. The receptionist smiled without fear in her eyes. People were talking, yes, but they were talking about change, not gossip. As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, stronger, calmer, more certain. But there was still that quiet question in her gaze. Can one act truly shift a culture? When the doors opened, the entire executive floor was waiting. Richard Aldridge stood near the window, phone in hand, watching the news scroll on a muted television. The headline read, "Elaine Carter to launch National Corporate Equality Framework." He looked up as she entered. "You realize you have started a movement, Elaine," he said, half proud, half wary. She gave a faint smile. Movements are just truths that refuse to sit quietly. He chuckled softly. "The council is calling it the Carter Standard. They want you to headline a summit next month in Washington." "I will go," she said, "but not to headline, to listen." Richard studied her for a moment. "You never stop surprising me." "I do not plan to," she said, stepping past him toward the conference table. The council representatives were already there, a diverse panel of leaders, journalists, and activists. Cameras were set up discreetly, capturing the discussion for their upcoming campaign. Daniel Hayes, the same man who had called her the previous day, rose to greet her. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, "thank you for joining us. What you did resonated far beyond corporate walls. We would like to partner with you to build something lasting." Elaine shook his hand. "Lasting only matters if it reaches the people who need it most." "That is exactly why we are here," Daniel said. "We want to create a framework for companies' nationwide mandatory bias audits, anonymous reporting channels, diversity accountability metrics, and we want you to help shape it." She nodded slowly. "I will help, but I have one condition." Daniel leaned forward. "Anything." "The first step cannot happen in boardrooms," she said. "It has to start in break rooms, in cafeterias, in the spaces where hierarchies disappear and humanity is supposed to exist." The panel fell silent. Her words were simple, but they carried the force of lived truth. Daniel smiled finally. "You just wrote our mission statement." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Ideas became blueprints. Blueprints became commitments. By noon, a plan had taken shape, a partnership between Aldridge Financial and the National Diversity Council to train not just employees, but entire industries. When the cameras stopped rolling, Daniel approached her privately. "You know, Miss Carter, people are calling you the face of a new kind of leadership." Elaine looked out the window, the city glimmering under the midday Sunday. "Leadership should not have a face. It should have a conscience." Daniel nodded slowly, his respect unmistakable. "Then you are the conscience we need." After the meeting, Elaine returned to her office. On her desk was a sealed envelope, no sender, just her name written in clean, even handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single line on plain white paper. "I was wrong. I see it now." No signature, but she knew. Mark Jensen. She stared at the words for a long time, feeling a strange mix of closure and compassion. Finally, she folded the paper neatly and placed it in her journal. Then she whispered, "That is enough." Outside her office, she could hear the soft murmur of employees in conversation. Not the kind of nervous chatter she used to hear, but genuine exchange, laughter, even a few apologies carried gently through the air. The company was breathing differently. Elaine sat back in her chair, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She had no illusions that one event could erase centuries of bias or decades of silence. But she also knew this truth. Real revolutions did not start with explosions. They began with one clear voice refusing to stay quiet. As the sunlight touched her face, she opened her eyes and whispered to the empty room, "Let the mirror keep reflecting." And for the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten: peace. Not because the fight was over, but because it had finally begun in earnest. The following morning began not with chaos, but with clarity. For the first time since the incident, Aldridge Financial felt awake, truly awake. The building pulsed with an energy that had nothing to do with profit or deadlines. Conversations were sharper, more thoughtful. People greeted one another with genuine eyes. There was still discomfort, but it was the kind of discomfort that meant something was growing. Elaine arrived at the office at precisely 7:45 a.m., her steps unhurried but assured. Carla was waiting at the entrance with a folder in her hands and a look that mixed exhaustion with pride. "Good morning, ma'am," Carla said, walking beside her. "The press is still buzzing. Every major network is replaying your interview, and the Mirror program has expanded faster than anyone expected." There are already over 50 corporations asking to adopt the framework. Elaine nodded, her face composed but her eyes bright with quiet satisfaction. That is good, but I do not want this to become a trend. Trends fade. This needs to become structure. Carla smiled faintly. Understood. Also, the first batch of survey data from our employees came in last night. You should see it. They entered the elevator. Elaine leaned against the mirrored wall, her reflection staring back at her, stronger, steadier, but still carrying the weight of leadership. Show me. Carla opened the folder. Inside were printed graphs and excerpts of anonymous feedback. Elaine scanned the pages in silence as the elevator ascended. Some of the comments were harsh, others hopeful. I realized I was silent too often. I never thought about what respect costs until yesterday. I used to laugh at jokes that hurt people. Not anymore. For the first time, I am proud to say I work here. Elaine's lips curved slightly. They are starting to see. Yes, Carla said softly. It is uncomfortable, but it is honest. When the doors opened, the executive floor was unusually quiet. Employees were at their desks, working, but every so often one of them would look up and nod respectfully toward Elaine. It was not fear anymore. It was recognition. As she walked into her office, she noticed a small envelope placed neatly on her desk. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She opened it and found a short message. Thank you for being the storm that made us open our windows. Elaine smiled faintly and set the note aside. Even the anonymous ones understand poetry, she murmured. Carla chuckled. Ma'am, the board meeting is set for 9:30. After that, you have a call with the Diversity Council to finalize the national rollout. Good. Let us get started. By 9:30 sharp, the boardroom was full. Richard Aldridge, the chairman, greeted her with a handshake. His expression carried the respect of a man who had seen enough battles to recognize when history had just been made. Elaine, he said, the board reviewed your partnership with the National Diversity Council. It is bold, but I believe it is exactly what this company needs. However, he paused. There is concern about backlash from certain investors. They are worried the message is becoming too political. Elaine took her seat at the head of the table, folding her hands calmly. Richard, truth is not political. It is moral. If an investor fears morality, perhaps they are invested in the wrong kind of company. A few board members exchanged glances, some nodding slowly. Walter Green, the senior member, smiled faintly. I agree. You have turned a scandal into a standard, Elaine. That is leadership. Not yet, she said quietly. Leadership will be when no one needs to go undercover to expose bias ever again. Richard leaned back. You know, I never thought I would see this company become a symbol for change. You have given Aldridge something money could never buy: dignity. Elaine's gaze softened. Dignity was always here. It just needed space to breathe. The meeting continued for nearly an hour, covering logistics, budgets, and media strategy. By the time it ended, the consensus was clear: the Mirror program would not just define Aldridge Financial. It would become a model for corporate accountability nationwide. Afterward, Elaine stepped out onto the rooftop terrace to clear her mind. The city stretched before her, alive and unfiltered. From up here, the streets looked like veins carrying the lifeblood of humanity, rushing, intersecting, endlessly moving forward. She inhaled deeply, feeling the wind lift her hair slightly. For the first time, the view did not symbolize isolation. It symbolized reach. As she turned to go back inside, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. She opened it. I watched your story with my team today. I manage a hospital cleaning crew in Chicago, my staff cried. We decided to start our own mirror sessions every Friday. You changed more than a company. You changed the way people see themselves. Elaine closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of those words. When she opened them again, she whispered to herself, it is working. Back inside, Carla met her at the doorway with another update. Ma'am, one more thing. The mayor's office just called. They want to recognize your contribution at next month's City Leadership Summit. Elaine gave a small laugh. Recognition is nice, but action is better. Tell them I will attend only if we can turn the award ceremony into a discussion on equality in hiring. Carla smiled. You never miss an opportunity to turn applause into accountability. Applause fades, Elaine said simply. Accountability echoes, The rest of the day passed in motion meetings, calls, planning sessions, but through it all, Elaine moved with quiet assurance. Every decision, every conversation carried an undercurrent of meaning. By evening, the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in amber light. Elaine stood by her office window, watching the reflections shimmer across the glass towers. She thought of Mark Jensen's letter again, the simple line, "I was wrong. I see it now." It was not forgiveness she felt, but peace, because seeing was the first step to change. As the city lights blinked awake one by one, Elaine whispered softly to her own reflection, "We are not finished yet." And somewhere deep within her, she knew the truth, the real transformation had just begun. Not in the boardroom, not in the headlines, but in every quiet moment where someone, somewhere, finally chose to see another human being fully. That was the revolution she had always been building. Not a spectacle, a shift, not a shout, a whisper that refused to die. That evening, as the last light of the day surrendered to the New York skyline, Elaine remained at her desk long after everyone else had gone. The office was still, the kind of quiet that only powerful buildings have at night. The faint hum of the air system and the soft glow from the city below were her only company. She looked down at the stack of letters and emails that had poured in from around the country. Custodians, receptionists, waiters, warehouse workers, all writing to tell her what her story meant to them. She ran her fingers along the edges of the pages, feeling the truth inside each one. None of them asked for money or fame. They asked for something far simpler: to be seen, to be respected, to be human. She exhaled, long and deep. It had been 72 hours since the video went public, and her life had shifted completely. She was no longer just the CEO of Aldridge Financial. She had become a symbol, something she had never asked to be. Symbols were powerful, but they were also fragile. One wrong step, and the same people who praised you could turn you into a warning instead. The elevator chimed softly behind her. Carla stepped out, holding a small takeout bag. "I thought you might not have eaten, ma'am," she said. "I brought you soup." Elaine smiled, the kind of smile that came from exhaustion but also gratitude. "You know me too well, Carla. Thank you." Carla set the bag on the table. "You should rest. The schedule tomorrow is stacked press, the mayor's summit, and the joint announcement with the Diversity Council." Elaine stirred the soup absently. "I will rest when this becomes more than a headline." Carla hesitated before speaking again. "Do you ever get tired of carrying the whole world on your back?" Elaine looked up, meeting her gaze. "Every day. But it is lighter than pretending nothing is wrong." For a moment, the two women just stood there, the distance between them filled with the quiet understanding of shared purpose. Then Carla's phone buzzed. She frowned as she read the message. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." She handed the phone to Elaine. On the screen was a social media post from an anonymous user claiming that Elaine's undercover stunt was unethical, that she had manipulated her staff and embarrassed a loyal employee on camera for personal gain. Thousands of comments had already piled up, half defending her, half attacking her motives. Elaine read in silence, her expression unreadable. Carla spoke nervously. "It looks like some former executives are fueling it. They are saying you created a hostile environment." Elaine placed the phone down gently. "Truth always disturbs those who profit from comfort. Let them talk. I am not here for their approval." "But this could turn public opinion," Carla said. "Should we issue a statement?" Elaine shook her head. "No. If we answer every false accusation, we teach people that lies deserve attention. What matters will speak for itself." Carla nodded, still uneasy. "You really believe that?" Elaine's voice was soft but resolute. "Justice moves slow, but it never stops moving." Carla's shoulders relaxed. "Then I will let you finish your soup, ma'am." She smiled faintly and left the room. When the door closed, Elaine stood and walked to the window. The rain had started again, light at first, then heavier. The city lights blurred into streaks of color against the glass, as if the whole skyline was breathing. Her mind drifted back to her first day at Aldridge Financial 20 years ago. She had been the only black woman in a meeting of 30 executives. She remembered the way they had looked at her when she spoke polite, but dismissive, like her ideas were decorative, not decisive. That memory still burned in her chest, not as pain anymore, but as fuel. She whispered to herself, "You walked into their world and built your own table." Her reflection in the window stared back at her, not the woman in the janitor's uniform, not the CEO in a power suit, but both. Two halves of the same truth. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message. She pressed play. It was from Derek, the security guard. The screen showed him standing in the same lobby where it all began. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I just wanted to say thank you again. The other guards and I watched your story on the news. We realized we are part of this too. So we decided to create a new motto for our team. Protect the people, not just the property. That is our mirror." Elaine smiled, eyes glistening. "That is leadership," she whispered. She replayed the message once more, letting the sincerity in Derek's voice remind her that change was not abstract, it was real, living, breathing in the hearts of people she had once walked past without knowing their names. The clock on her wall ticked past midnight. She walked to her desk and opened her journal again. On a fresh page, she wrote slowly, deliberately, June 25th. Today, the backlash began, the predictable noise of those who fear reflection. But I will not answer them with anger. I will answer them with endurance. I will keep building, keep walking, keep teaching. The truth does not need defenders, it needs witnesses. She set the pen down and looked out at the city one more time. The rain was lighter now, the sky breaking just enough to reveal a slice of moonlight. Elaine whispered, "If they only knew that every drop of resistance only makes the soil richer." She turned off the lights and left the office, her heels echoing softly down the empty hall. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean. Somewhere far below, a janitor pushed a mop across the wet marble floor of another building, humming softly to themselves. And somewhere in that song, in that small act of unseen labor, Elaine's message lived on quiet, persistent, unstoppable. Because revolutions, she knew now, do not end with applause. They end with someone choosing kindness when no one is watching. The next morning, the city rose under a clean, pale sky. The rain had washed the glass towers until they gleamed, and the streets below glistened like a promise renewed. Yet inside Aldridge Financial, the tension was thick again, different now, but real. The backlash that had begun the night before was spreading. The internet, relentless and hungry, had found a new obsession. Elaine Carter. Her assistant Carla entered the office early, tablet in hand, worry etched across her face. "Ma'am, you are trending again," she said, her voice tight. "Half the headlines praise you. The other half are accusing you of creating a spectacle for publicity." Elaine did not look up from her coffee. The world always divides itself between those who understand truth and those who fear it. Carla hesitated. "The board is nervous. There are investors calling, wondering if you plan to issue a formal response. Some are threatening to pull funding unless you clarify your motives." Elaine finally looked up, calm and steady. "Tell them I will not defend morality to people who measure it in profit margins." Carla exhaled slowly. "Understood, ma'am. But may I say something?" "Of course," Elaine said. Carla lowered her voice. "You have inspired millions, but the weight of this, it is on you alone. You do not have to carry it like that." Elaine smiled faintly, her expression softening. "Carla, when you hold something heavy long enough, it does not crush you, it shapes you." Carla nodded but did not look convinced. Moments later, Richard Aldridge entered, his steps heavy with concern. "Elaine," he began, "you know I respect what you are doing, but this public storm is growing faster than even you can control. We need to address it strategically." Elaine gestured toward a chair. "Sit, Richard. Tell me what strategy looks like when truth becomes inconvenient." He sighed and sat down. "It looks like survival. The council meetings, the press, the politicians, they all want a piece of this story. They are turning you into a symbol, and symbols are easy to break." Elaine leaned forward, her tone firm but not defensive. "Then let them break the symbol if they want. What matters is that they cannot break the lesson." Richard rubbed his temple. "You think like a philosopher when the world wants a fighter." "I am both," she said simply. "Because if I fight without philosophy, I become what I stand against." He looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "You are impossible to argue with." "That is why I am still here," she said, almost smiling. The intercom buzzed. Carla's voice came through, tense. "Ma'am, there are reporters gathering outside the building. Some employees say they have been approached for interviews." "Oh." Elaine stood and straightened her jacket. "Let them ask. We have nothing to hide." "But ma'am—" "It is all right," Elaine interrupted gently. "Truth does not whisper forever. Eventually, it must speak in daylight." She walked to the elevator and Richard followed. "You are really going down there?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," she said, pressing the button. If they want a story, they will hear it from me, not from rumors. The elevator descended slowly, each floor a silent countdown. When the doors opened to the lobby, flashes of cameras met them like lightning. Reporters crowded the marble floor, microphones raised, voices overlapping in a wave of noise. Miss Carter, do you regret the way you handled the undercover incident? Was this a publicity stunt to promote your company? Are you exploiting racial tension for attention? Elaine did not flinch. She walked forward with the calm precision of someone who had already decided what would matter and what would not. She raised her hand slightly, and the noise softened. Her voice, when it came, was measured and clear. I have heard the accusations, she said. I have read the headlines. And to those who question my motives, I will tell you this. I did not go undercover to create chaos. I went undercover because silence had become too expensive. The crowd stilled. She continued, her tone gaining quiet power. When you lead a company or any group of people, you inherit their fears, their habits, and their blind spots. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. So, I decided to see. I did not do it for fame, and I did not do it for pity. I did it because I needed to know the truth about who we really are when no titles are showing. The reporters exchanged glances, their questions paused mid-air. Elaine's voice softened but carried farther. This was never about one man, or one company, or one moment. It is about the mirror we all avoid until someone holds it up for us. That mirror is uncomfortable, yes, but so is growth. A woman from a major network stepped forward cautiously. Miss Carter, do you believe this will change anything long-term? Elaine met her eyes. Change is not a headline. It is a habit. It is the small choices people make after the cameras turn off. The woman lowered her microphone slowly, her eyes glistening. Elaine looked around the room, at the faces watching her, the skeptical, the inspired, the uncertain. If you take anything from this story, she said, let it be this. Dignity does not need permission, and truth does not need approval. Then she turned, walked calmly toward the elevator, and disappeared behind the closing doors. The lobby stayed silent long after she was gone. Back upstairs, Carla was waiting. You really just walked into a storm and made it sound like a sermon, she said, half in disbelief, half in admiration. Elaine smiled faintly. Storms do not scare me anymore. They clear the air. She looked out the window at the crowd still gathered below. The flashes of cameras had already started to fade, replaced by murmurs of something else respect. Carla spoke quietly. You just rewrote the narrative, ma'am. No, Elaine said softly. The truth did that. I only gave it a microphone. Oh. She turned away from the window and picked up her journal, writing a single line before closing it again. When they come with noise, answer with clarity. Outside, the clouds were breaking, and light poured back through the glass towers. Inside, Elaine Carter stood in that light, calm, unshaken, and ready for whatever came next because she had already learned that power was not about who spoke the loudest. It was about who stood still the longest and refused to look away. By the next morning, the storm had changed direction. What had started as criticism was turning into clarity. The same media outlets that questioned Elaine Carter's motives were now running deeper pieces, not about scandal, but about culture, about the quiet rot inside corporations that prized profit over people. In the lobby of Aldridge Financial, the same marble floor that once reflected humiliation now reflected transformation. Monitors across the building streamed live updates from the Mirror program, showing workshops taking place in offices across the country. Employees from every level, executives, analysts, janitors, were sitting together at round tables, facing the same questions. When was the last time you looked at someone and did not see their title first? What bias have you inherited without realizing it? It was no longer just a company initiative. It had become a movement. Elaine arrived at headquarters early, her black coat brushing against the polished floor as she walked. Carla met her near the reception desk, tablet in hand, face glowing with cautious excitement. Ma'am, you need to see this, Carla said. Over 120 companies have signed up for the Mirror program, even our competitors. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Even the ones who criticized us? Carla smiled. Especially them. It seems shame is a faster motivator than inspiration. And Elaine let out a soft laugh. Then her tone grew thoughtful. Whatever brings them to the table. The important part is that they stay once the cameras are gone. The two women walked together toward the main conference hall, where a crowd was already waiting. Employees, journalists, and council members had gathered for the official launch of the national partnership between Aldrich Financial and the National Diversity Council. The room buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of coffee, nerves, and something rarer hope. Elaine took the podium, her posture upright but unforced. The murmurs faded instantly. She began quietly, her voice carrying through the still air. A few weeks ago, this building was the stage for something painful, a moment that exposed what happens when respect is conditional. Since then, many have called me brave, others have called me reckless, but I do not care about either. What I care about is progress. Her eyes swept the room, landing briefly on familiar faces: Derek, the security guard, the young analyst Evan, and even the receptionist Natalie. Each of them looked changed, more certain of their own worth. Elaine continued. The Mirror program was never about punishment. It was about reflection. It asks each of us to stand in front of truth and not look away. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is necessary. The audience listened, motionless. Her words felt less like a speech and more like a reckoning shared. She pressed a button on the podium, and the large screen behind her flickered to life, displaying messages submitted by employees. For the first time, I understand what silence costs. I see now that fairness is not automatic, it is a choice. Respect is not given by title, it is earned by humanity. Elaine paused. These are not slogans, these are awakenings. This is what change looks like when it starts from within. The audience erupted in quiet applause. Not loud, but deep meant, not performed. When the room settled, she spoke again, her tone lowering, almost intimate. The Mirror has done its job here, but there are other rooms, other buildings where voices are still being dismissed. This program is for them. For every worker who has been told they do not belong, for every leader who forgot what leadership means, and for every bystander who stayed quiet because speaking up felt dangerous. Her eyes met the camera at the back of the room. To every company watching this, the Mirror is coming for you too. You can join willingly, or you can wait until silence exposes you. Either way, reflection is inevitable. A hush fell over the room, the kind that comes when truth walks in and refuses to leave. Elaine stepped back from the podium, letting her words hang. The applause that followed was not thunderous. It was heavy, sustained, purposeful. Afterward, as the audience dispersed, Daniel Hayes from the National Diversity Council approached her. You do realize, Miss Carter, that you have just rewritten what corporate reform looks like. Elaine smiled faintly. I did not rewrite it. I just read it aloud. Daniel chuckled softly. And now everyone is listening. Carla handed her a note just then, an internal memo from the legal department. At the top, it read, all departments under Mark Jensen's former leadership have completed retraining. Zero tolerance policy reaffirmed. Employee satisfaction up 32%. Elaine read it once, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her jacket. Good, she said quietly. That means we are healing. As she walked out of the hall, the cameras turned off, and the noise began to fade. The city awaited her next move, but for now, Elaine felt something rare and absolute, calm. She had not shouted, and still the world had heard her. She had not demanded power, and yet it had followed her. In the glass reflection of the lobby doors, she saw her own image again, not as a symbol or a CEO, but as a woman who had faced the system and remained standing, unbroken. Let them see, she whispered under her breath. The Mirror works both ways. And with that, Elaine Carter stepped back into the daylight, the city glimmering ahead like a stage she was finally free to walk across on her own terms. That night, New York glowed like a living pulse, streets humming with energy, glass towers breathing light into the dark. But inside Elaine Carter's apartment, everything was still. She had turned off her phone, silenced the world, and stood barefoot by the window, the city unfolding below her like a constellation she had once only dreamed of reaching. For the first time in weeks, she let herself stop. No calls, no reporters, no speeches, just silence. But silence, she knew, had its own kind of voice. It whispered memories she had buried long ago, memories of where all this had begun. She closed her eyes and saw herself at 22 years old, standing in a borrowed suit, clutching a folder of resumes that no one wanted to read. She remembered waiting outside an office where the receptionist had looked at her, then at her skin, and said, "The interview list is full." It had not been full. She had seen the names written on the sign-in sheet, spaces still open. But she had nodded anyway, smiled anyway, walked away anyway, because back then, dignity had been something she learned to protect quietly. Now, decades later, she had learned that silence does not protect dignity. It buries it. The doorbell rang, breaking her thoughts. She opened the door to find Carla standing there, her coat dusted with rain, holding a small box. "I know you said no visitors, ma'am," Carla said softly, "but I thought you would want to see this." Elaine stepped aside. "Come in, Carla." Carla placed the box on the coffee table. Inside were neatly bound letters, hundreds of them, all handwritten. "They arrived at the office today," she explained. "From employees, from other companies, even from students. They are calling it the Mirror Mail." Elaine lifted one envelope, reading the return address. Detroit, Michigan. The handwriting was uneven, almost childlike. She unfolded the letter and read aloud. "Dear Miss Carter, my mom cleans offices at night. People walk by her like she is invisible. Yesterday she made me watch your video. I did not understand at first. But when you stood up in that lobby, my mom cried. She said, 'That could have been me.' Now I see her differently. I think the world does too. Thank you for helping me see my mom." Elaine lowered the page slowly. Her eyes glistened, but she did not blink them dry. "This," she whispered, "is why we do it." Carla smiled softly. "You changed how people see themselves, ma'am." Elaine shook her head. "No, Carla, they changed themselves. I only held up the mirror." She picked up another letter, this one from a small-town business owner in Texas. It read, "We started our own version of the mirror. The first meeting was awkward, but by the end, everyone was crying and laughing. I never knew how much pain sat beneath politeness. I never knew how much courage kindness takes." Elaine folded it carefully and placed it beside the first. "It is spreading," she said quietly. "Yes," Carla agreed. "You started something, no one can stop now." Elaine turned toward the window again, the skyline shimmering in reflection. "That was never the goal. I just wanted people to feel what I felt that day in the lobby, the sting of being unseen, and then the power of being undeniable." Carla watched her silently for a moment, then said, "You know, ma'am, I used to be afraid to speak in meetings, but now, every time I do, I imagine you in that gray uniform, looking those men in the eye. It reminds me that strength does not need volume." Elaine smiled. "Strength only needs truth." Carla hesitated, then pulled one last envelope from her coat pocket. "This one came directly from him," she said softly. Elaine froze. "Mark Jensen?" Carla nodded. "It is not another apology. You should read it yourself." Elaine took the envelope, unsealed it carefully, and read in silence. "Miss Carter, I have spent the last few weeks watching every video, reading every article. At first I was angry, then ashamed. I lost my job, but I found something else perspective. I am volunteering at a youth center now, teaching kids about workplace respect. I do not expect forgiveness, but I needed to say this. You did not humiliate me. You healed me. Because the man who shouted that day no longer exists." Elaine's throat tightened. She folded the letter slowly and whispered, "Maybe that is what redemption looks like. Not perfection, but change." Carla said quietly, "You gave him the chance to become human again." Elaine exhaled, her shoulders easing. "Then maybe this story is not about humiliation at all. Maybe it is about awakening." Carla smiled through her tears. "I will make tea." While she walked to the kitchen, Elaine stood alone by the window once more. The city stretched beneath her, chaotic, beautiful, alive. Somewhere out there, a mother and her daughter were watching that same skyline and seeing hope. Somewhere, an office janitor was walking through the night shift with a little more pride. Elaine pressed her palm against the glass. The reflection of her hand met the reflection of the city lights, a union of everything she had fought for. And in that quiet moment, with rain starting again outside, Elaine whispered the words she had carried her entire life. "You may try to ignore us, but we will keep shining until you cannot look away." The world was still turning, still flawed, still learning, but for the first time, it was beginning to see. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of Elaine Carter's office, painting soft gold over the dark wood table. The city below was already alive, cars honking, voices rising, life returning to its rhythm. But inside Aldridge Financial, Something quieter and more deliberate was unfolding. Elaine stood in front of the mirror near her desk, the same mirror she had placed there the day after the incident. It was not decorative. It was a reminder. She adjusted her jacket, looked into her own reflection, and whispered softly, "Do not forget what it felt like to be unseen." Her assistant Carla entered with a small smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Today's schedule is lighter than usual. Only 2 meetings and the afternoon panel with the council." Elaine nodded. "Good. After today, I want to visit the community center in Harlem. They have been hosting the Mirror program sessions every Friday. I want to hear from them directly." Carla grinned. "You are becoming the busiest woman in America." Elaine laughed softly. Busy is only a burden when the work has no meaning. The intercom buzzed, and Richard Aldridge's voice came through. "Elaine, I think you should come to the lobby." She frowned slightly. "Is something wrong?" "No," Richard said, his tone unreadable. "Something unexpected." Elaine and Carla exchanged a look before heading down. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sight that stopped her in her tracks. The entire lobby was filled with employees, hundreds of them standing shoulder to shoulder. At the center, Derek the security guard held a folded piece of paper. Beside him, Natalie the receptionist and Evan the analyst stood smiling nervously. When Elaine stepped out, the crowd erupted not in cheers, but in something deeper. Applause. Real, heartfelt, rising like a wave that filled the marble hall. Derek stepped forward. "Miss Carter, we wanted to thank you, not with words, but with something we created together." He handed her the paper. Elaine unfolded it carefully. Inside was a printed pledge, signed by every employee in the company. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "We see you, we hear you, we stand with you." Elaine's breath caught. "You did not have to," Evan interrupted gently. "We did, because this company does not feel like the same place anymore. It feels alive. You gave us something bigger than a job. You gave us a voice." The applause grew again, louder this time, echoing through the glass walls. Elaine looked around the room at faces of every color, every title, every story, and for once, she had no words, only tears that she refused to hide. When the sound quieted, she spoke softly. "I came here to change a company, but what you have built, it changed me. Thank you." Richard, standing off to the side, smiled faintly. "You always knew how to turn pain into progress." Elaine wiped her eyes and turned to the crowd. "From today forward, the Mirror program is not just ours, it belongs to all of you. Keep holding it up, every day, even when no one is watching." Natalie called out, "We will, ma'am," and laughter spread through the room like sunlight. As the crowd began to disperse, Derek approached once more, lowering his voice. "You know, Miss Carter, that first day when I stopped Mark Jensen, I was scared, but now I know I was right to speak." Elaine smiled. "Courage always feels like fear until it is finished." He nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you for making that fear worth it." When she finally returned to her office, she placed the signed pledge inside her journal, right beside the page she had written on the night of the storm. She looked out at the skyline, the sunlight shimmering on the windows of nearby buildings. For the first time, she did not see walls of glass. She saw mirrors, thousands of them, reflecting a world slowly learning to look back at itself. And as she whispered to the empty room, her voice carried the steady calm of a woman who had turned reflection into revolution. Let them keep seeing. By late afternoon, the Manhattan air was heavy with summer heat, but inside the community center in Harlem, the atmosphere was electric. Folding chairs filled the main hall, walls lined with posters from the Mirror program. On one of them, in bold black letters, it read, "Change begins the moment we see each other." Elaine stepped inside quietly, not in her usual tailored suit, but in a simple blouse and slacks. No security detail, no fanfare, just her, walking among people who were not impressed by titles but moved by truth. The room smelled faintly of coffee, paper, and purpose. At the front stood a young woman leading a session, a former janitor turned program coordinator. Her voice carried conviction. "We used to come here after work to complain," she said, smiling. "Now we come to plan. That is what reflection does, it turns pain into blueprint." Applause rippled through the room. Elaine sat in the back, unnoticed at first, listening. She saw faces that reminded her of her own beginnings, people tired but unbroken, people who had learned to survive systems that were never built for them. After the session ended, The young coordinator spotted her. Her eyes widened, and the room fell silent. "Miss Carter?" she whispered, almost disbelieving. Elaine smiled warmly. "Please, call me Elaine." The woman stammered. You are the reason we started this program here. We did not think someone like you would actually come." "I am someone like you," Elaine said softly. "Always have been." The woman nodded quickly, then gestured to the group. "Everyone, this is Miss Elaine Carter." Before she could finish, Elaine raised her hand. "Today, I am not here as a CEO. I am here as a witness." She stepped forward, her presence commanding yet gentle. "I came to listen. Tell me what has changed for you since you began this work." An older man in a maintenance uniform stood. "I used to think respect was something you had to earn by being quiet. Now I know silence never bought me dignity. I speak up now, and I do not apologize for it." A young woman, maybe 25, added softly, "I was scared to confront my boss about how he talked to me. But after your story, I did. He listened. He actually listened. I think he was ashamed of himself." "Ugh." Elaine's eyes glistened. "That is not shame," she said. "That is recognition, and recognition is the first language of change." Someone began to clap, and soon the room filled with applause, warm, rhythmic, alive. When the noise faded, a little boy no older than 10 tugged at Elaine's sleeve. He held out a crumpled piece of paper. "My mom said to give you this," he said shyly. Elaine unfolded it. Inside, written in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping my mom believe she is important again." Her throat tightened. She knelt so she could look him in the eye. "You tell your mom she has always been important. She just needed the world to remember." The boy grinned and ran back to his mother, who stood watching with tears in her eyes. As the evening light dimmed through the center's tall windows, Elaine addressed the group one last time. "This," she said, sweeping her gaze across the room, "is what success looks like. Not profit, not applause, but the day people stop apologizing for existing." She paused, her voice steady but full of emotion. "When I put on that janitor's uniform, I thought I was pretending. But now I see I was remembering. Remembering who we fight for and why it matters. Do not let the world make you forget that your story has power." The crowd stood, clapping again, no stage, no cameras, just raw gratitude. As she left the building, the sun was setting over Harlem, bathing the city in a deep amber glow. Children played in the street. Music floated from an open window. Life continued, vibrant and unapologetic. Elaine stopped for a moment on the sidewalk, taking it all in: the laughter, the movement, the noise of humanity finally heard. "This," she whispered to herself, "is what justice sounds like." And then, with a quiet smile, she walked on one woman against the backdrop of a city that, for the first time, was starting to truly see itself. Morning broke over the city like forgiveness. The skyline shimmered beneath a pale sun, and for the first time in months, the world felt still, not silent, but settled, as if it had taken a long breath and finally remembered how to exhale. Elaine Carter stood at the rooftop terrace of Aldridge Financial, a cup of coffee in her hands, the wind threading softly through her hair. From this height, she could see the river curling through Manhattan, sunlight dancing across the glass towers she had once feared and then conquered. But what she saw most clearly were not the buildings. It was the people below, tiny silhouettes crossing streets, opening stores, greeting one another, lives moving forward. Carla joined her quietly, holding a tablet. "Good morning, ma'am," she said. "Or should I say, Madam Legend? The governor just announced that the Mirror Initiative will be introduced statewide next quarter. You did it." Elaine smiled faintly, eyes still on the horizon. "We did it. All of us." Carla scrolled through her screen. "The emails keep coming. Schools, hospitals, tech companies, even the transit authority. Everyone wants to adopt the framework. You started something that is not going to stop." Elaine turned toward her. "Good. Let it keep growing. Let it belong to everyone." There was a pause, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who no longer need to explain themselves. Then Carla said softly, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not worn that uniform that day?" Elaine looked down at the city again. "Yes," she said. "I would still be leading this company, but I would not be leading myself." Carla smiled. "That is exactly why people follow you." Before Elaine could reply, the elevator doors opened, and Richard Aldridge stepped onto the terrace. His face was lined with age, but his eyes carried something lighter now, something like pride. "I thought I would find you up here," he said. "You always liked the view from the top." Elaine smiled. "Not for the view, Richard. For the reminder. When you stand this high, you see how small power really is." He chuckled. "You know, when you first came to this company, you scared everyone half to death. You never raised your voice, but you made people listen. I see now why. Because silence is the loudest weapon," Elaine said softly. He nodded. "You rebuilt this place from the inside out. You turned a scandal into a standard. And in doing so, you reminded all of us what leadership actually means." Elaine looked at him with quiet sincerity. "Leadership means standing in the fire long enough for others to see that it does not burn when you stand in truth." Richard extended his hand. "Well, here is to standing, then." She shook it firmly. "To standing," she echoed. When he left, Elaine remained on the terrace, the morning sun warming her face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded note, the one from the child in Harlem that read, "Thank you for helping my mom believe she is important again." She smiled and slipped it into her journal, closing it gently. The sound of the city below rose like music horns, voices, laughter, all blending into something bigger than chaos, something alive. Elaine whispered to herself, "This is what healing sounds like." As she turned to go back inside, she stopped by the glass door and caught her reflection. Not the CEO, not the woman in the gray uniform, just herself, human, whole, free. She said quietly, "You did not just clean the floor, Elaine, you cleaned the mirror." And with that, she walked back through the glass doors, the sunlight following her, as if the world itself refused to let her step back into shadow. Down below, in the lobby where it had all begun, the marble floor gleamed. Not because someone had polished it, but because it now reflected something new, respect. And in that reflection, the story of Elaine Carter came full circle. A woman who knelt on the floor to reveal the truth and stood tall to make sure no one ever had to kneel again. The mirror had done its work. The world was finally looking back.